Back in the 1990s, multimedia and 3D graphics was the hottest craze. Machines that could play CD quality audio and video was amazing, though PCs needed a little extra help compared to Acorns and Macintoshes. And heavy hitters such as Doom and Duke Nukem 3D were starting to solidify their place in history. But the means to create 3D content was cumbersome and not something with a kid with a budding imagination could get to grips with. Enter 3D Movie Maker in 1995, a program sold under Microsoft's For Home brand as PCs were starting to make their way into the household. It sold for $45 US, or just over that at $96 when you adjust for inflation. 3D Movie Maker received very high praise, with magazine writers praising the high variety of characters and scenes to choose from, and how intuitive everything was laid out for the aspiring filmmaker to make 3D animated shorts. With Matt Lake on CNET very humorously saying that, and I quote, 3D Movie Maker gives encouragingly professional results. Considering this was during an era where SGI ruled that scene, I think this was optimistic at best. However, on the flip side, I can see where he was coming from, as you could do some amazingly neat stuff with this program on an average Pentium computer of the time. As far as I can tell, Microsoft quietly discontinued the product in 2001. Now I want to take this time to thank my Mastodon fellows for helping me find articles and pricing for 3D Movie Maker. They were a lifesaver as it was something I was struggling to source myself. So thank you again for everyone on Mastodon for your help. Interesting point I want to bring up is the render I use. This is actually among the first titles to use the bRender game engine. If that name rings a bell, that's because that's the exact same game engine used on very popular games of the 90s such as Wing Commander, Privateer 2 and the original Carmageddon, which I think is a pretty fun fact. And with that brief history out of the way, let's take a look at 3D Movie Maker in action. When you open Microsoft 3D Movie Maker for the first time, you get this neat intro animation where you get to meet McZ and Melanie. If you live in the US, McZ was voiced by the legendary Mike Shapiro. The same Mike Shapiro who later voiced the G-Man in this little known series called Half-Life. You might have heard of it.
Prepare for unforeseen consequences.
In any case, he does a great job of bringing McZ to life. However, he is not my McZ. See, you might have already picked up on my phrasing earlier, but the UK got a separate English release. And in that version of 3D Movie Maker, McZ is voiced by the Scottish comedian Jack Lynch. I am a bit biased as I have played the localised version as a kid, but I much prefer Jack Lynch as McZ. To me, he has a lot more energy and silliness that is very fitting for the type of character McZ is. Have a listen.
My name, if I may present myself, is McZ. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Whee!
It just feels personally like Jack McZ has more life to him, honestly. In any case though, the consequent times you open 3D Movie Maker, you get a list of actions that takes you to a specific part of the program, or you can rewatch the intro cinematic if you want, which I have personally done so many times as a kid. You can click on the ticket office where after another silly animation you get to easily choose between watching a movie or to create a movie. Alternatively, you can select the doors on either side of the ticket office and you get to go inside the reception area. I do enjoy the virtual building aesthetic of the interface. No dialog boxes or buttons to access functions, just feels more interactive. Moving on to the main area I wish to cover in 3D Movie Maker, I am going to the backstage and click on the center door to get to the meat of the program. The interface is drop dead simple, and in fact if you don't click on the X at the beginning, the software holds your hand anyway. I remember as a kid when I first got my hands on a CD, or even before when I played with the demo, that I just learned the program through some good old experimentation and playing around. No tutorials, no nothing. Just messing around to see how the program worked. Sometimes with interesting results if memory serves me correctly. I also admire how much personality the GUI's design language has. I mean, look at it! 3D buttons with fun graphics, advanced options hidden through a flippable panel. It just looks amazing. Speaking of the interface, let's quickly go over the layout you are presented with. The top holds the toolbar with tabbed categories for each part of the production pipeline. To the left is where all the actors in the scene are. The right is the props for the scene, including the 3D text. The bottom holds controls for scrubbing through the frames and scenes, playback and volume controls in the middle, and having the undo, redo, copy and paste, save button, the help machine, and cinema map to the right, with the bottom showing the name of the project file and the ability to exit 3D Movie Maker. I really like how the interpretation for the undo redo button is a cracked egg. It's a great analogy and is a lot more colourful for a kid than the arrows. It's also quintessentially 90s, as frankly I'm struggling to picture modern programs aimed at kids being this imaginative. You can only undo and redo one action, which is a bit of an Achilles heel for more advanced users, but it's a great way to stop kids accidentally undoing something they didn't want to. Now the way Microsoft actually was able to have a 3D animation program on at least a 486 in the days where you needed a high-end MIPS workstation from the likes of Silicon Graphics is that they did a little bit of cheating. And honestly, it's a pretty ingenious solution for the limitations of an average PC of the era. The backgrounds are actually pre-rendered, and only the actors, props and 3D text are rendered in real time. While the basic geometry of the scene is present to allow for proper clipping, the actual materials, lighting and shadows are textures overlaid into the mesh. Having said that, however, it's not something you'd notice if you were a kid. Stars knows I didn't when I was 10 or 11. They also achieved such a high frame rate by having the program itself run at 640 by 480, which 3D Movie Maker automatically resizes for when you open it, as well as the actual window preview is comparatively a postcard in size. The buttons at the very top of the tabs is where all the magic happens initially. The way to spawn in your actors and props are done with these buttons at the top. Now 3D Movie Maker has no way to create new motion from scratch, and relies on clip motion by clicking on the Actions button. Here you'll see there is 2 pages worth of animation to choose from. This includes walk cycles, or talking animation as there is no facial rigs on these models. Once you select a clip motion, the program automatically switches you to Resume Last Action, which is how you apply the animation to the actors. To do this, you can just either hold the left mouse button, or you can click and drag, which is useful to use with the running motion. You can't animate the rig further if they are out of frame, as annoyingly you need to click and drag on the actor itself. 3D Movie Maker also have controls for XYZ positioning and rotating, along with some scale tools. You'll need to click on this button here to access the rotation tools, which gives a drop down with a button for each axis. For position, you just click on the Move tool. While we are on the subject of the tabs, More Tools has some of the more advanced options that 3D Movie Maker has, such as an option to stop props or actors clipping through the floor, which I find honestly impressive that 3D Movie Maker has collision for the ground. Scale is this button right here. Another cool feature is the fact that most of the actors, and even some of the props, have alternate skins that you can switch to, which adds a lot of variety. There's even a thing for model groups for things like glasses and hats, which is also an awesome addition. It's not something Microsoft needed to do, but it really helps adding even more personality to the actors and allows you to sell what type of person they are. Back in 2022, I wondered if you can make a poster like you can with the more modern but similar enough program Source Filmmaker, but only using 3D Movie Maker and other tools that you would have access to in the 90s. And the answer is you can. I was able to make a market-like poster using assets available in 3D Movie Maker and did my compositing and post work in Adobe Photoshop 3.0. Since there is no default way to render out from 3D Movie Maker, I literally just screenshotted using the print screen keyboard button and cropped it in Photoshop. And honestly, it was an interesting experience pretending it was 1997 and these were the only programs I had access to. The default transition your movie will use is a basic dissolve. This type of transition was very popular in the 90s and early 2000s as far as I can tell. Peeking into the aforementioned advanced tools gives us the button to change the transitions to either a hard cut, the dissolve, and 2 fade transitions, one to black and one to white. Here you can even change the order of scenes by clicking and dragging them quite intuitively. I like how there is a thumbnail so you can see what's in the scene while making these changes. Another side note I wish to add is that using a sphere prop with the explosion action kinda makes a great pseudo particle system. Music and sound effects is under the sounds tab, and really they're at the very top of things you'll do in this tab, with the exception of adding WAV files, which can also be done here. I primarily used the music option both when I was a kid and when reusing 3D Movie Maker for this video. There are some short stings included, which is good for a surprise moment, while longer ones are good for a general vibe of the scene. By default, each scene has its own music track assigned, but you can easily change it if the vibe isn't to your taste. All music tracks are MIDI files, as back in the early 90s MIDIs were more resource efficient than playing large audio files that is more common practice today. One final thing I wish to cover is the program's 3D character generator. By clicking on the big 3D button, you are greeted to the generator in the trademarked easy to use interface. Honestly, I am fully impressed of how fully featured it is. There are many different shapes, colours, and even has a array of animations if you click on actions. I tried making an intro card with the generator and a knight floating in space, and honestly I think the wave animation I chose for the text goes very well. And I also think this is what the 3D character generator is for, to create wacky intro cards for an upcoming short. Maybe even credits, but they'll be a little more difficult to align as you can't have multiple lines in a single 3D title. I personally think certain shapes fit certain actions better than others, and I remember there was a particular combo I always used as a kid as it looked so awesome. And there we have it, 3D Movie Maker. I kinda forgot how fully featured this program was. I think it's fair to say this product was very successful for Microsoft, and it even earned 3 expansion packs. And while it is a pretty small slice between using PowerPoint 2000 and Gmod and eventually SFM in my personal animator journey, I think 3D Movie Maker was probably pretty instrumental to helping me to create 3D shorts. I think this must be true for so many people, as 3D Movie Maker still has a large following to this day, with new 3D models and scenes you can download, and avid animators making amazing work that you can watch on YouTube or Reddit. Not only that, but in 2021 Microsoft released the source code for the program over on GitHub, and user Foon fought that and created the 3D Movie Maker Forever project. And here you can download a fully compiled version of the US release over on that GitHub, and it even works on Linux. However, it's been pretty dead as far as I can tell, with no work being done on some of the additional features that was planned for the project. And with that all said and done, thank you so very much for joining me down this trip down memory lane once again, and I'll see you next time.